Hello, Manoli.
Hey Warwick, how are you?
I'm okay, thanks.
How was your quiz evening yesterday?
Let's not go down that road, please.
I take it your team didn't do too well.
I chose the wrong person to do the typing because it was done on Kahoot and only one person could answer.
Yes.
And they couldn't spell.
That was a big mistake.
Yeah, I'll tell you later all about it. Let's just say we shout and tell the person to answer. We say, pick the green answer. Oh, sorry, I picked orange by mistake. How do you get green and orange mixed up?
Colorblind.
Okay, Manoli, just to let you know, we are live. We are streaming to YouTube. It's all set up on your ECR page. So yeah, for a way.
Okay, thank you so much, Warwick. Okay, good afternoon, fourth years. Welcome to the session. So I'm just going to start by sharing my screen. Okay, so before we start with this afternoon's lecture, I would like to just take a few minutes and talk about the next online test. So the online test 2, which is scheduled for 11th of June, I have decided to make the content for that test Unit 3 and Unit 4. So I've now put it in line with the live lectures that we are having. So in a way, the first online test covered Unit 1 and Unit 2. For your assignment, you should have focused on some of the other chapters as well. And then the second online test will cover aspects of Unit 3 and Unit 4. So after you have viewed the live lecture, I would strongly suggest that you look at the study letter for Unit 3, you look at the learning outcomes, the assessment guides, you read the relevant chapter for Unit 3, which is Chapter 6 from Fundamenta, and you start making your notes. I am still to finalize the self-study unit for Unit 3, and I promise by tomorrow I would have that up on ECI. So please, as you are reading the chapter, watching the video, and you've covered the content for the unit, please take the time to actually do those questions, because you will find that as you work through the questions, you gain more understanding of the content in the unit, and then you'll be more comfortable to answer the questions in the online test. Okay, so for now, I'm going to continue with this PowerPoint, but what I'd like to start by doing, sorry, my mistake. I'd like to stop video just so that we can focus on the PowerPoint, but let's go back to the start of this PowerPoint. Okay, so the focus for Unit 3 is education management leadership tasks in schools. And like I've just said, the relevant chapter from Fundamenta is Chapter 6. There are some students that have communicated to me that for some reason or the other, they do not have the textbook. And I would suggest very strongly that you still try to get a copy of the textbook, because I don't think that this is a module that you can actually be assessed on or try to do an assessment in the absence of looking at the relevant chapters from Fundamenta. So please make sure that you do all of the reading required from Chapter 6 of Fundamenta. Sorry, I'm just trying to get the laser pointer to use that for this PowerPoint. So the first thing that we need to look at is understanding education management. So let's look at education management in the context of a school environment. I think that as a starting point, all of you need to understand that the principal is vital in playing a role in the education management of the school. But like I've said in previous lectures, he or she alone cannot be totally responsible for education management. So you are, as a teacher in a classroom, a manager. You are responsible, for example, for managing the classroom climate of the school. We can't look at a principal trying to have a positive or a sound classroom climate. That responsibility is the sole responsibility of an educator. So therefore, when we look at education management, I think the key terms in this slide is interactive and interrelated. And I've said before in a presentation that the prefix inter looks at or means between. So we are looking at a process that involves a group of people. We're looking at something that happens between groups of people as well. So once again, as well, we're looking at a school as being dynamic in the context of an organization. So groups of people working together to ensure that there is a positive and an effective culture of teaching and learning. The second point with regards to understanding education management is that this goal of a positive culture of teaching and learning is only possible if the principal of the school uses the resources available to them. So you might be wondering, what are the resources available to a principal? And I think one of the most important resources is the human resources. So to go back to this process being interactive, a principal alone cannot manage a school without support from his teaching staff, the administrative staff, be it the secretaries that are responsible for the admin, be it the ground staff that are responsible for maintaining the field, maintaining the pool, for example. So human resources are absolutely vital to the process of education management. Over and above that, the other resources within a school environment are those physical resources, the facilities available at the school. Here, we're obviously talking about a rugby field. Like I just said, the school might have a pool. We might be looking at something like a library, the computers in the library. All of those fall under the heading of the physical resources being available in the school. And the last resource that is absolutely important also has to be available to an education manager is the financial resources. It is very difficult for under-resourced schools to have effective education management as well, because that financial resource may not be available to them. Okay, so the next slide deals with the relationship between management and education. And here, if you look at the definition of education management, it is provided for you on page 110 in the textbook. And if we look at that definition, it says education management is a specific kind of work. And at its core, it entails the management of learning and teaching. So in a way, we need to look at this in the context of, if a school does not have a good pass rate, and we judge a school, unfortunately, by its pass rate. If a school does not have a good pass rate, for example, the education or the educator and the manager leader have essentially failed in their core task of a school. So a school can succeed with regards to sports and culture, but if its academic pass rate is not what it should be, then a school essentially has not dealt with its key business, because the key business of a school always comes down to effective teaching and learning. And when you look at the tasks that are involved in terms of education management, here, this is where the POLC model, and I think in the assignment PowerPoint lecture, I encouraged you to look at the POLC model in the context of your assignment. So the POLC model essentially covers the four most important management tasks of a principal. So in the POLC model, the P stands for planning, the O, organizing, the L, leading, and the C covers control. So those are the four main tasks when it comes to education management. So you will see that leadership in the context of the POLC model is actually one of the management tasks of a principal. And then it goes on to say the following questions are relevant when defining management. In the context of education management, I think we've covered the what, where does it happen, it obviously happens at a school level. Who is responsible for education management? Like I just said, the most important person at a school itself is the principal. But we can't forget the important role that the school governing body plays in the management of a school as well. Why is management so important? We've just said that in order to achieve the goal and the key business of a school, namely an effective and positive culture of teaching and learning, that is why you have to have education management at a school. This slide looks at both the functional and the management work of educators. So in the context of this module, school management, it is important for us to bear in mind that, yes, you have to have a principal that is a good manager leader so that you can effectively, as an educator, do your job in the classroom. But when you are in the classroom, you need to manage that space, you need to manage the learners, you need to manage your teaching. So in that regard, educators themselves do have management work to do within the context of the classroom. The functional work of a teacher is our core purpose. Why are we in the classroom? It's to ensure effective teaching and learning. So I think this aspect of the unit is quite easy to understand. In terms of levels of management, once again, from Fundamental, you will see that there are 4 different levels of management. So every single individual is involved with self-management. We all have to manage our lives, and therefore, in the context of a school environment, we all have to manage, as educators, our own teaching. So a teacher within the classroom is definitely involved with self-management on an individual level. If you are an educator within the classroom, you've got to manage that classroom, so you will be involved in micromanagement as well. If you are a head of department in charge of, for example, a particular learning area, be it languages, then you'll also be involved in the meso management of the school. So please understand that depending on your position within the school level, you may be involved in more than 2 of these levels of management. In terms of macro management, here we're looking at management at a district, provincial, or national level. So yes, a principal at a school cannot be involved in this macro management, but please understand that the macro management does affect what is done at a school, and it affects what happens at a school. So please take the time to understand the different levels of management and understand that if you are an HOD of a school, you will now fall into more than one level of management. For that matter, even if you are an educator, you are falling into 2 categories of this management. Where do educators fit in? I think we've covered this aspect. We fit into management of the classroom, managing the learners, and managing the process of teaching and learning itself. Okay, this slide is quite important in that it is trying to make the distinction between leadership and management. So stop and ask yourself at this point, who do you know that you consider to be an exceptional leader? And generally, the qualities of that person will be someone who is very good at inspiring others, someone that is exceptionally good at motivating people, someone that is good at putting a vision in place and then starting the process of that vision being seen to completion. So whenever we look at a good leader, it is definitely someone, like I just said, that is inspirational and is very good at motivating people to start a process. So leadership relates to, like it says on the slide, to mission, to direction, and to inspiration. And another important point on this slide is the last bullet, where it says that school principals have to be both leaders and managers. So we spoke about the Polk model, which puts forward the 4 main management tasks of an educator manager. So the Polk model, once again, P for planning, O for organizing, L for leading, and C for control. The post-Korb model, which looks at what contemporary, which is modern present-day manager leaders do, encompasses other aspects of management and leadership. And some of them are very vital in the context of a principle as well. For example, if you look at the issue of staffing, surely the principal of a school should be responsible and be involved in the process of hiring staff. A principal may be required to sit in on an interview where staff need to be hired, for example. Another issue with regards to staffing on a school level, it is the principal that needs to ensure that things like staff appraisals happen, that certain staff members are developed in certain ways. So staffing as part of this model is very important with regards to a principal at a school. I think another very important one is budgeting. A principal has to not only make financial plans for the next year. So in all schools, certain HODs or a head of sport, for example, is required to put forward a budget. So in a way, the principal has to manage spending as well as income within a school for the following financial year. So other aspects over and above the Polk model are also vital for a contemporary manager leader to be involved in. So take some time to read through this particular model in your textbook as well. Okay, so now we look at what effective leaders do. So like I said, I think we covered, for example, that they are inspirational and they're very good at motivating their team. And also here, they are good at getting people to work together and therefore encouraging collaborative effort. I think another one to bear in mind, a leader cannot have that position unless he or she has followers. So therefore, it is important here that someone cannot be considered to be a true leader unless they get enough people to also follow them. The concept of servant leadership looks at somebody who's able to empower others by working together with them. Morality is also very important in the context of an effective leader. So we could ask the question, for example, was Hitler an effective leader if we look at this aspect of being a moral person? Okay, so the question that we can go on to, and this once again is a table that I've put together, but the task cycle between a manager and a leader, I have taken these points straight from Fundamenta. So if you look at, for example, the difference between the management task cycle and the leadership task cycle with regards to this aspect. Okay, a leader is someone that is able to turn a vision into a workable project because they are inspirational people, because they're able to motivate people to start working on a project, sorry. But it is a manager who's going to be responsible for developing clear work programs. So in a way, management and leadership have to go hand in hand. You can't have good management without effective leadership. Likewise, in order to ensure that a task is complete, a leader alone may not be able to ensure that a task goes on to completion. A manager has to step in order to ensure that. So that is why in the context even of this module, we look at management leadership. So both are essential in the context of a principal at a school. So educators as leaders, I think here as well, it's important to understand that in the classroom environment itself, educators have to be leaders. As a teacher within the classroom, it's important that you are able to motivate your learners. It's important that you are able to, for example, try to the best of your ability to get them to reach their full potential. So in a way, we're looking at a teacher maybe using Maslow's hierarchy of needs and getting children to attain the last level of that hierarchy, which is self-actualization. So educators are leaders as well in the context of their classroom. Educators can also be leaders within the school environment. Yes, an educator may lack official authority, but they can build their leadership on how other teachers view them. They can gain respect from their colleagues by being, for example, hardworking. They can gain respect from their learners by being consistent in how they discipline the learners. So it is not to say that educators cannot be leaders both within the classroom and in a school context. So the most important part of this unit is definitely the education management tasks and subtasks. So please make sure that you look at the diagrammatic representation of the education management leadership process that is on page 122 of your textbook. And what this actually points to is that the model itself, I should maybe go to the next slide. I hope you can see this clearly. I tried to scan and copy and paste it into the PowerPoint because it's quite difficult to talk about it without actually being able to view the model itself. So this diagram is the one that is on page 122 of your textbook, and it's based on the education management leadership process model. So this model indicates the interactive and interrelated nature of education management. Okay, so once again, those tasks are planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. It's impossible for us to, as a principal or even a member of the school management team, to at any one time say that we're now just focusing on planning as one of the management leadership tasks. So yes, the Polk model points to 4 management leadership tasks, but obviously these are all also interrelated. Whilst you engage in planning, you may sometimes also be occupied with organizing. So I think the starting point is very important for us to spend some time and focus on this. So if you look at the core or the center of this model, this is the focus of education management, and this is the purpose of education itself. So the center of the model has the acronym CULTS. So this acronym stands for a culture of learning, teaching, and service. And then you can see that everything else in this model, concentric circles that are going outwards, are now based on this as the goal or the focus of any school environment. So the culture of teaching and learning also allows for improvement with the aim of increased learner achievements, and therefore all the other circles focus on this primary focus, on this primary purpose, sorry. Okay, so if you then go on to look at the next concentric circle, we are looking at, like I said, the Polk model. So we are looking at the management leadership tasks. Okay, so the 4 management leadership tasks, we can start here. Like we talked about, it is planning, organizing. Okay, leading has been changed to or renamed as guiding and directing, and then control, which has the word accountability also within this aspect of the model. The next concentric circle now looks at the management leadership subtasks. So what is important to understand here is that each of the management leadership tasks will have their particular subtasks. So if we start with planning. So planning, you should know, includes the setting of a vision for the school, a mission statement, as well as aims and outcomes. Aims and outcomes are now more short-term goals that the school would like to achieve. We're looking at maybe something that can be achieved within a few years and something that can even be achieved within a few months with regards to outcomes. Okay, so that is what planning entails. And then if you look at the subtasks with regards to this management leadership task of planning, the subtasks are things like problem solving, decision making, as well as also policy making. So if the school, for example, is involved with setting out a new policy with regards to dress or code of conduct with the learners, the task that the management team is involved with is planning, and the subtask under that is now policy making. With regards to the management leadership task of organizing, here we will look at organizing in the context of a principal delegating certain tasks to members of management or to educators, coordinating certain activities, as well as coming up with organizational structures. So organizing on the whole looks at implementing the plan. So in a way, the process of management leadership starts with planning. When we put the plan into place, or we put the plan in process, for example, that is now going on to organizing. So once again, organizing looks at implementing the plan. Okay, so the third one, which is leading, can also be known as directing or guiding. Here we're looking at the ability not only to implement the plan, but to inspire others so that the plans are transformed into reality. So the subtasks, when it comes to leading as a task, the subtasks involve communication. So a good leader is very good at communicating his or ideas to others, so a plan can go on to completion. It involves motivation. A good leader has to inspire, has to motivate others to not only start the plan, but to complete it. And then the final subtask of leading as a task is building relationships. So the last task of control, here we look at constantly evaluating and adjusting plans. That is what the control aspect of management leadership looks at. And the subtasks include setting standards derived from planned aims. It includes supervision, evaluating deviations and then taking corrective actions. And it can also include disciplinary measures that may be needed to be taken into account. The next concentric circles looks at the different management areas within a school context. And I think this is important as well for you to know, is the question of where does education management happen? In the previous slide, I said to you, it happens obviously within a school by the principal, but there's different management areas within the school. So one of those management areas is obviously what we call learner affairs. And this can be broken up into two parts. What happens within the classroom, known as curricular affairs, and what happens outside of the classroom, be it on the sports field or in a theater, for example. So what happens outside of the normal school hours, outside of the classroom, often is what we call extracurricular affairs. So learner affairs being broken up into curricular and extracurricular affairs is just one of the management areas of a school. The second management area within the school is now staff affairs, and this involves both the academic staff as well as the non-academic staff. So the non-academic staff may be the administrative staff as well as the ground staff. And then very importantly, administrative affairs as well, in terms of what the administrators are actually tasked with. Then we go on to the physical facilities, teaching and learning materials, as well as ICT affairs. The last management area within a school is now the school governing body. So we're looking at school community affairs and governance, sorry. And then this last concentric circle now looks at over and above what is happening within the school, how the school is affected by things that happen outside of it. So a school is governed by, for example, legislation and other policies, and that could be at a district, provincial, or even at a national level. So once again, please ensure that you have a full understanding of this particular model. You can read up more on the information and the bulleted points, for example, in Fundafenta. Fundafenta is also broken up each aspect of the model and then has detailed information under each aspect of the model. So please make sure that you take the time to look at that. Okay, so what I've done here is just simply broken up or removed from that model the task and the subtask of education management, because this is absolutely vital for your understanding. So once again, the POLC model: planning, organizing, leading, and control. This is the four main tasks of education management. And then each of the tasks is further broken up into its subtask. So if you look at the subtask of leading, that involves motivation, it involves communication, it involves the building of relationships. And this was, in fact, all covered in detail in the previous unit. And so we will be going on in the module to look at some of the other subtasks within it. Okay, so please, once again, take the time to look at these four tasks of education management, as well as the subtasks and what those subtasks actually mean in the context of a school environment. Okay, so I think this as well is also repetition. We are looking at the focus of and the need for education management leadership. And it all boils down to what is the key business of a school. And the key business of a school is to have an effective culture of teaching and learning, and to ensure that you actually are creating, as teachers, we also have an emphasis on creating lifelong learners. I think I have covered, with regards to the management tasks, all the resources that are available to a manager leader at the school. So just to refresh your understanding of that, those resources are the human resources. So it's all of the various stakeholders that are involved in the school environment. It is the physical resources, so the actual buildings and whatever is available for effective teaching and learning. And then very, very importantly, the financial resources as well. And then the four management tasks. So going back to the POLC model: planning, organizing, leading, can also be called directing, and then control, where we are actually not just evaluating the process, but evaluating the actions of people. And if people fall short, that is why disciplinary measures can be part of controlling as one of the management tasks. Okay, so this actually takes me to the end of the presentation. So like I said, the important chapter from Fundamenta is chapter 6. So please take the time to read through that chapter. At this time, can I ask if there are any questions?
Manoli, there are no questions as yet.
Okay, thanks so much, Warwick. I think that if there are no questions, I'll just talk a little bit about the class tasks. So to go back to what I started the presentation with, your second online test on 11th of June will cover units 3 and 4. And then we will go on to look at units 5 and 6. And what I will do is make the class tasks on those units. I think we have to give you assessments as well in the last 2 weeks of June. So as a result of that instruction and in keeping in line with that instruction, we will run your class tasks on the last 2 units of the module and in the last 2 weeks of June. Sorry, I was forgetting what I wanted to say there. Okay, if there are no questions, Warwick, are you happy that we end the presentation, or should I wait for a few minutes to see if any questions do come through?
Manoli, there are no questions. If you feel that we can end the session, then I'll go by what you say.
Yeah, yes, I think we've covered the PowerPoint, and if students would like to ask questions later on, they're more than welcome to send me an email about any of the content that is covered in this video.
Okay, great. Thanks, Manoli.
Thank you very much, Warwick. Have a good day further.
You too. Thanks, Manoli. And thank you to all our attendees.
Yes, thank you very much for those that attended today's session.
Okay. Thanks, Manoli.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.